We're going to really have a really inspiring conversation today, aren't we?
Yeah, thank you, Neil. I have Andy Sislow. I met Andy through the adoption community 4 or 5 years ago, maybe a little longer. And he had an inspiring story from the start. When we met, he was an adoptee, and I always talk about, in the adoptee community, there's the hyper assimilators and the rebels. And, I was able to kind of blend with my family, but Andy had a lot more difficulty with that, blending with the family, which I think, led to, some troubled, youth. And he eventually went on to get his PhD as a sociologist in sociology, correct? Um, and then, kind of some of the demons of his youth continued to haunt him. But, he recovered, and currently he's an entrepreneur. He's got I'll let him tell you about his company, but he's got a an arcade company that he's started up using with slingshots. So he's kind of bringing back some old technology in a new way, and he's doing great with that. So I want to welcome Andy Sislow. Andy's
Thank you.
from outside of Hartford. How are
All
you,
right,
Glad to
Andy?
be with
Andy.
you. Hi.
Good. So tell us about your company, Andy. Like, how did you get into the idea of slingshots as I mean, it's kind of an interesting
Yeah,
endeavor and a
I get this.
transition. So
I
talk
get this
about your
question.
transition, where you came from, and how you ended up here.
Yeah, I get this question quite a bit. It's an odd thing. It's we're the first of our in our class. It's a family-friendly indoor themed slingshot shooting gallery, and in Bristol, Connecticut, outside of Hartford. And what we tried to do was marry precision slingshot target sports with your nostalgic toy of youth. And so we've opened up slingshot, a passion of mine, to kids as young as 4 and 5 years old, and we see people in their 90s in here too. And it all really came out of my struggles as a young person and coming to terms with them in my midlife. So it,
Yeah,
yeah,
and I've been to Andy's house, and he had like a little shooting gallery in the back of his house out there, and that's how it began. And then within several years of me first meeting you,
mhm,
you're turning this, your passion into a business. But
yeah,
you've kind of used it as a part of your therapy as well. Just
yes,
the
very,
eye-hand coordination, the focus. Um,
very much, yeah.
Go
So
ahead.
when I first started out in slingshot after rediscovering it, as an adult, in our when we were kids, almost all of us had a slingshot of one sort or another. They were not as good as they are today, and a lot of that has to do with the technology and processing rubber. I won't get into that. But when I rediscovered them, I couldn't believe how accurate it was, and it was coinciding with the time that I was coming out of the hospital, a second hospitalization. I had a near-death experience this second time, and I was rehabilitating physically at home under, pretty much constant supervision and care. So when I built up the strength to get outside, stand, which was quite an achievement, I I needed something to do, and I loved being out there with the wildlife and sitting in nature. I'd been inside in the hospital and then at home for so long. Being outside felt liberating. I pulled a slingshot out of the closet that I had bought for my then way too young daughter, figuring I would hold on to it till she got old enough to play safely and we'd do something in the backyard together. Well, I didn't wait for her. I pulled it out and I started playing around, and I couldn't believe how difficult it was. What I didn't know is there was a lot I didn't know. And that starts with, buying a slingshot, from the hardware store and it's not set up for you properly, et cetera. But I was persistent, and it was something I was able to do. Pulling back at that time, I was probably, my draw weight was around 10 pounds or so. That was a struggle. And so over time, I built up strength. I was able to stand longer and longer, concentrate longer. And I found it as a very useful tool for practicing focus and mindfulness. So not only was I outside simply enjoying the natural environment, but now I was also rebuilding my internal workings as I built up my strength internally. So slingshot and the repetitive nature of it is a lot like Zen archery. It is, and for me, I practice it very much like Zen archery, in that it's a daily practice. I have a goal. I'm making small improvements every day, not only in hitting the targets, but in keeping my focus, maintaining my flow, as they say, something that one can practice and achieve the flow state with daily practice. You fall into patterns a lot easier, and
Yeah, I
you get rid of
remember.
the bad habits. You pick up the good ones.
Yeah, I remember when you were starting this, you said you kind of challenged me, like Jack, like explain to me how using a slingshot is good for your shoulder. And I'm
Yeah,
like, I don't know. I never thought about slingshot as being something that'd be good for your shoulder. But then as you kind of educated me on it, there's gross motor. Like the same, like you said, archery is very much the same, or even golf, fishing. So
right.
many things that people do for recreation. You know,
Absolutely.
to free your mind and get in nature and leave some of the stresses behind. But you're right. I mean, there's gross motor and then fine motor and
Hmm.
focus and concentration, and then higher levels of flow and just as a very therapeutic, non-pharmacologic
Right.
way to kind of spend your time in a.
Yeah.
And now your studio, or would you call it a studio or
It's a gallery. We
your
call it a
gallery?
slingshot shooting gallery.
Now, how big is this? You're outside of Hartford, between Hartford and New Haven, kind of, right?
Between Hartford and Waterbury, really, and not far from New Haven. Um, it's a 3,100 square foot facility, wide open, colorful, musical. It's very approachable. It's not a bar environment. I don't drink. That was part of the it's part of the behavior that got me into trouble in the first place, and what got me eventually outside shooting was getting away from that.
Yeah.
There's no alcohol here, in part because it doesn't mix well with slingshot, in our opinion. Although we've had some imitators come online, I hear, that are bringing a bar environment into something similar to what we've pioneered. I hope they do well, and I hope they respect the sport.
Yeah, I've seen that in terms of like the hatchet throwing. When
Yeah,
you get
that's very
hatchet,
common.
you
Yeah,
got
axe
hatchet
throwing.
throwing in a
We
in
get
a
compared to
bar.
axe throwing a lot, but
Yeah.
I don't really know that it's all that close of a comparison. Honestly,
No.
it's a target sport, and that's true. But beyond that,
I guess I was referring more to the idea of safety and alcohol
yeah,
and potential instruments that could poke someone's eye out.
right,
You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
But yeah, but like I said, your story, like you were a PhD in sociology, is
that's
that
correct.
correct?
Yeah,
And
my
I mean, what a transition. As a sociologist, you were published and academic.
yes,
Um,
I was
and
a
now, like I
research
said, you've
scientist.
turned your passion or your mode of rehab,
Mhm.
uh, which became a passion, and now it's become your occupation.
Yes, absolutely right. And it might not be apparent, but it directly flows from my academic work. And what I mean by that is the area of study that I was engaged in was specifically stress and health. And so I have publications in international journals that tap at things like resiliency, what it takes to overcome major trauma, chronic trauma, who does well, what types of populations are more exposed to stress, and what types of populations have the resources that will benefit them in staving off any potentially damaging effects of any stress they're exposed to in life. So these things are socially patterned. And unsurprisingly, especially now to us, Jack, is that children often who were adopted in the period that we were back in the so-called baby scoop era were often exposed to trauma. A lot of adopted kids are still today, no doubt, but back in the day, the practices were a bit different. And so we were more disconnected from our ancestry and the possibility of even that we might have experienced something potentially damaging to our psyches.
Hmm.
That wasn't even brought up back in the day.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, we talked about this a lot, because Andy and I have had, deep brother to brother, heart to heart conversations about pretty much everything that you can. And, even though we came, when we first met, it's like, Jack, we couldn't be further on the spectrum of, our adoption experience. Um, but we shared in so many of those basics.
right. I want to
And
be I want to be careful not to suggest to anybody that adoption itself is necessarily a harm of some kind. I don't think Jack or I either think that. However, it can be itself a risk factor. It was more about the practice of adoption and the secrecy.
yeah.
And in my case, it was transracial adoption, is what we call it, meaning I was adopted into a white family from a Latino ancestry, and I wasn't provided with the necessary understanding of what that would mean to me, whether I liked it or not.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
The other thing, as a men's clinic, the thing that I really, am attracted to with the slingshot, like I said, we deal with men, but men at some point start as boys.
that's
And
right.
I worry about young men and boys. I worry about my son in the world, where being a man is, almost from the time you come out of the womb, you're told you're toxic, you're narcissistic, this anti-male bent, if you will, that it seems to be out there. But this is something that is very attractive to young boys, to go, it's like one of these things like, don't play with that slingshot. You're going to poke someone's eye out. That's dangerous. You can't do that.
Right.
But this is a way to practice some of these, these dangerous boy things in a safe, supervised,
Yeah,
controlled, they're not out shooting at each other.
that's right.
It's
Yeah,
something, underprivileged youth, youths in general, instead of, being stuck in front of the computer and playing video games, this is a way to really hone, your fine motor skills,
right.
your concentration, some discipline, and camaraderie with other friends. I think it's a
Absolutely.
fantastic thing for, I mean, young children in general, but
Yeah.
particularly boys.
And
Yeah.
I love the idea, Andrew.
Mhm.
And when Dr. Jack was bringing that up, and the fact is, it's kind of like art, not archery, but also people are into axe throwing. This is a real niche thing you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I find that it is appealing to young boys and teen boys, tweens, but really it appeals to everybody. Um, some people want to come in and treat the experience more like a rage room, where you go and smash targets and that's your enjoyment. And there's nothing wrong with that. This is a safe place to have an outlet to do something like that.
Mhm.
But on the other side of the spectrum, so to speak, is so the way I practice it, which is very peaceful and more in line with meditation than with destruction. We have a culture here that we've tried to cultivate, and we believe that our customers are eager to pick up on. That is really it's non-aggressive in terms of belligerency or any kind of law breaking. We're simply shooting at targets. Our targets here in the gallery never represent people, buildings, cars, animals, anything like that that
Mhm.
you wouldn't want your kids to shoot at in the real world. Now, in terms of the animals, here in Connecticut, it's not legal to hunt with slingshot. So, maybe that would be more appropriate in another state. But
Mhm.
here we just keep that idea right, away in the first place. It's all about you and your friends, a good time, or, maybe some precision improvement.
Yeah. And I think your entrepreneurial story is just as inspiring as your personal story. Because I know, like I said, this, while your personal story and then you've turned it into entrepreneurial, but you also started off in a mall. I mean, you started off
We
with just,
did.
you started off with, a smaller pilot, if you will, and
Right.
now you've gone into your own facility, you know,
Yeah.
and I see you advertised on Instagram all the time. Do you do group outings? How do you market and get your clientele to come in there?
Well, we have a lot of different use cases. The kids are not an obvious one. So we have an after school special that we're running through the fall. We call it the Back to School Kids Club. And so it's unlimited play for half an hour for $10. And, it's a chance for kids to show up and go nuts at low cost. And, it's unlimited play. It's not like a 3 shots for $5 Carnival Midway experience. You're going hard for a half an hour.
Yeah, and then you could
great.
really get out a lot of BBs in a half hour.
You really can, yeah. We use actually rubber safety training ammo, but yeah, they go 160 miles per hour or so, about 200
Wow.
feet per second.
Is there a sport? Is this a sport too, Andrew?
Absolutely, it is. It's an international competitive sport. It's not as represented in the United States as elsewhere in the world, particularly China, but also Europe, Latin America. There are competitions in the U.S. And I post about them on our social media. So anybody who wants to follow that, they can keep up, and I'd be happy to share all of my knowledge for free with anybody who wants to ask me. It's part of the culture of Slingshot, is sharing your knowledge for free and encouraging others to come and become independent. I want people to come here so they don't need me. And I'll teach them
think
how
about
to
it. The slingshot's got to be one of the oldest weapons. I mean, what is the history of it? There's got to be an interesting, right?
You've heard of the biblical story of David and Goliath, no doubt.
Right.
David's job was what? He was a shepherd, right? So he carried his slingshot to scare off, predators from the flock, like wolves, etc. And so, but that was a different instrument. It was a long string with a pouch that would be swung over the head. And so people think of that as a slingshot, and it is in some sense, but it's more of a hurling of a stone. It's not an elastic action, which came along with Charles Goodyear and the vulcanization of rubber. Actually, he is a Connecticut native, and his workshop was here in Connecticut, so we feel like we could boast some local pride in that. Over the many decades since Goodyear, the process has been refined and improved. Now, Dr. Jack, I'm sure you're very familiar with flat latex exercise bands. And the ones that we use here in the gallery are very similar to those. It's 99 point something or other percent a natural organic property that grows from a tree. It's a tree sap that gets processed in this vulcanization process, which is different than a synthetic rubber that you would get in like a car tire. In any event, all of that technology improvement in the processing of rubber brought with it a lot of potential for accuracy. And around the U.S., in all kinds of small towns and around the globe, the same thing. With the internet, slingshotters started talking to each other about best practices, and over the years have developed a rather refined and precise sport. And so at the highest level, the competition is scary accurate.
Sure.
And I encourage anybody to look at the World Slingshot Association to see what's going on. That's the big governing international body. And every 2 years, there's a major competition. And most of the time, Asian players best the rest. And but we're coming up, and we're trying to do our part here at Fork and Band.
Yeah, I think, your catchment area, I think, is huge for something like this. I mean, you're so unique and such a niche. It's worth travel. It's worth to come down,
Absolutely.
Within an hour and a half of your facility. I'm sure there's millions of people.
And we do get day trippers from an hour and a half away or more even. We get people stopping by who are passing through Connecticut on vacations and drive across the state because they hear about us.
Yeah.
People from out of the country, and this is the first of its kind, anything like it. We did base it on, you mentioned earlier that we were in a shopping mall previously, and that's right, we did a proof of concept there for the current version of this. Prior to that, we were in the field teaching sport shooting to campers. So our first brick and mortar sort of attempt was in a shopping mall. And this was inspired in the first place by a shopping mall setup that I saw on social media that was set up in China maybe a decade ago. It wasn't anything nearly as fun, sorry to say, as what we have going on. We have, dozens of fun targets and different themes, and they're mechanical and passive. And anyway, but I just love the idea that you could do something that is, this activity is frankly vilified. People don't understand what slingshot is today. And I have a theory about why that is, if you'll indulge me. Remember a moment ago, I had mentioned picking up a slingshot off the hardware store shelf and it not being set up for me. Well, what happens if you don't have somebody who knows what they're doing is you get a slingshot that's either overpowered typically or underpowered. And then, a kid or adult will pick up the first thing they see, they think they can throw with it, which is typically a rock. And you don't want to do those things. So, what we try to do is tune in the right amount of latex with the right amount of draw length for the weight of the ball that you're throwing. And then you start seeing accuracy. But nobody would even know that if they pick something up in the hardware store and go home and start goofing around. Something's going to go errant. A neighbor's going to yell at you. And that's kind of the typical way it goes. Of course, Hollywood hasn't helped us either with the depictions of, poor behavior and delinquency.
No, I think it's fantastic. It really is. It's, technology meets delinquency or something.
Yeah.
I don't know how you say it, but it's
it's
a great way to.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate rep.
Yeah, I mean, like many things, but no, I think it's fantastic. I think fathers, like I said, we're a men's clinic. I think, fathers, bring your sons, bring your daughters.
It's a great way to get to know
learn a new skill, broaden your environment of your knowledge of the history of it. I think, there's so many, uses and history of it, and just a great way to spend time with the family doing something unique that's close to home.
You get it, Dr. Jack. It's low cost, it's approachable, it's fun, it's exciting.
And it may stimulate may stimulate other interests, and just
absolutely,
hey, it's there, I can do it with a real ball and a real slingshot, not a video game. So
this is real life.
Great idea.
Yeah, thank you.
So how do we get a hold of you? How do people reach you? Give all the information on your socials and your location and all that, so people can get a hold of you.
Sure. Well, the best way to follow us is through our website, forkplusbandslingshot.com. Fork is the tree fork, plus a rubber band equals a slingshot, if you want to remember it that way. So forkplusbandslingshot.com. You could look that same name up on social media. We're most active on Facebook, a little less so on Instagram, a little less so still on TikTok. I believe my family is more active on that, helping get the word out. It's a small family business. We're still building. The trajectory is a good one. We're hoping to fit into the community and be seen as a valuable asset here in downtown Bristol, Connecticut, where there is a downtown revitalization occurring right now with lots of shops and restaurants and live, work, play environments.
Yeah, it really is. It doesn't take long like I said, I've kind of grown with you through a lot of this, but it's an inspirational story of overcoming personal challenges. It's overcoming business challenges. It's that entrepreneurial spirit that is, turning something, something tragic or something, a challenge in your life, taking something that's a challenge in your life and turning it into a business that is helping others to achieve their goals, and
that's
have
what
fun.
we hope to do.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Neil.
I think it's so fascinating, and hopefully people, when they're in Bristol, Connecticut or near Bristol, to come visit you, Andrew. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And go to the ultimatemensclinic.com. And remember to check out Dr. Jack on social media and the Ultimate Men's Clinic on social media. And make sure you like and subscribe to the Ultimate Men's Movement.